Sketch the graph and find 3 points of this function f of x equals the negative absolute value of x plus 4 minus 3. All right, so there's a couple ways to do this. We can make a table. Okay, we can make a table, plug in points. I don't know how many you need, right? Maybe 5, 6, 7 points, and then plot those points, and then you can get your graph, okay? But the way that we've been doing this is using the transformations, okay? So we know that this is based on the, well, I put y, right? It's f of x, but this is the absolute value function, okay? So we can use the absolute value function here, okay, as sort of the base function, right? Now, what does the absolute value function look like? So we know that it's a basic V shape here, right? So let's just draw out the graph, and we know that we should get something that looks a little bit like this, right? We know when x is 1, y is 1, x is 2, y is 2, when x is 3, y is 3. But also when x is negative 1, y is positive 1. When x is negative 2, y is positive 2, right? That's what the absolute value sort of does. Okay? So we get this, pretty V shape, right? It goes through the origin and whatnot. Okay, but now we see, okay, what are these transformations, right? How are we going to transform this graph based on this function right here? Okay, remember, we always do the horizontal shifting first, okay? So in this case, you should ask yourself, all right, what is the horizontal shift here? Okay? And this plus 4 tells us what? This plus 4 tells us to move to the left 4 units. Okay? We also know we do the vertical shifting last, right? Vertical is always last. Okay, so the horizontal shift is the change in x. So in this case, this plus 4 tells us to move to the left 4 units, not to the right, but to the left 4 units. Okay. Now, are there any reflections here? Do we see any negative sign? Okay, and of course we do, right? But in this case, notice it's outside, right? I mean, you can think of the absolute value also as a parentheses, right? But it's outside the parentheses, so that means we reflect this across the x-axis, okay? So for example, if this negative was inside, okay, the parentheses or next to the x, we would reflect that across the y-axis, okay? And then lastly, the vertical shift is this guy down here, right? So we're going to shift it down 3 units. So let's go ahead and take a look, right? Okay, let's imagine, okay, I'm going to take this point here, right? We know this point is 0, 0, right? So for example, we know that this point is 0, 0. But let's do this. Let's move it to the left 4 units. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? And then we'll look a little something like this, right? But now we're going to reflect it across the x-axis, which means we go upside down. Okay? And then what is the last thing that we have to do here? We have to go down 3 units. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, go down. So essentially this point, 0, 0, has transformed into this point right here, right? That'll be negative 4, comma, negative 3. Now we know the basic shape is a V, but since we reflected this across the x-axis, we should look a little something like this, right? And we should. So now I do want you to find 3 points, right? So here's where you can do a couple things, right? You can use the actual transformation, right? So you can take each point on the original graph, apply the transformations and find where the new point is, or you can just make a table here, okay? So let's make a table. Now we know that when x is negative 4, when you plug the negative 4 in here, we get 0 minus 3, we get negative 3, as we expect, right? So the best thing to do is always pick a point like right to the next of it. So let's try negative 3. What happens when you plug in negative 3 in here? Well, negative 3 plus 4 is 1. The absolute value of that is just 1 times negative 1 minus 3, we get negative 4 here. So when x is negative 3, this point here should be negative 4, which we sort of expect, right? Negative 3, comma, negative 4. And similarly, when x is negative 5, right? Negative 5 plus 4 is negative 1, but the absolute value of that is positive 1. But then we multiply that by negatives, that becomes negative 1 minus 3, which is negative 4. So that will be this point right here, right? Negative 5, comma, negative 4. So essentially, these 2 points, right? If you take this point, shifted it to the left 4 units, reflected it across the x-axis, and then moved it down 3, we would end up over here. Okay? So when you're doing these, You can make a table, maybe like 6 or 7 or 8 points, help you get a good idea. Okay? But, I think it's always better just to use the transformations. Or you can just do a combination of both.